We won't talk about that. Okay. Here we go. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Let's start.
Okay. Parshas Matos and Masay. You should just know that the combined Parshas of Matos and Masay are the longest Kriyas HaTorah.
Yes.
It's 244 psukim. Even Parshas Nos was 176. But it's not as much as Parshas Matos and Masay.
248, right?
244, 248, whatever it is, it's long. Okay, so it's interesting that it has that type of a kriya. A lot of different things in Parshas Matos and Masay. It starts again by Daber Moshe El Roshe HaMatos Ibnei Israel. It doesn't start the way it normally starts. Normally the parsha was started by Daber Hashem El Moshe Leimer. Daber El Bnei Israel. Doesn't say that. Moshe speaks to the head of the tribes, Roshe HaMatos. We're going to go into that a little bit. What was Moshe's idea? What was his plan? He spoke to the heads of the tribes, and he began to tell them all the laws of Neder and Nedova, promises. It begins, Ish ki yidor neder la Hashem, a person makes a promise to Hashem, lo yachel devoro, he should not do anything to prevent him from fulfilling his words. Kechol hayotze mipiv yasa, whatever you say, you should do. In English we have the term, my word is my bond. If I say something, you can take it to the bank. It's supposed to be solid gold. And it talks about if a woman makes a neder and her husband hears it, he can be mefer, or the wife or the father hears it from a daughter, he can cancel it out. And it goes through all the laws of neder and nedova. Very important. Now there's a famous Rambam. The Rambam says as follows. He says that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi established 6 sections of the Mishnah. Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. And based on those 6 sections, we have the Gemaras. What are the 6? Zeroim talks about planting. Moed talks about all the Chagim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Megillah, Purim, etc. It talks about Noshim, Hilchos Gittin, Kiddushin, Ksuvas, Nezikin, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra, Sanhedrin, Avodah Zorah, Kotshim, Zvachim, Menachos, Erechim, and Taharos, Hilchos Nida, and all the laws of Tumah, Tahara, Porah Aduma, etc. Where does the Masechet Nedarim fall out? I mean, there's a whole Masechta, volume of Shas, called Promises, Nedarim. In which section does it fall out? Is it part of Zroim? No. Is it part of Moed? Is it one of the holidays? Of course not. Koshim Taharos. You have 2 choices. It's either part of Noshim, which is laws for women, or it's part of Nezikin, which is laws of the Sanhedrin. So where do you think Nedarim falls out? Sanhedrin. It falls out in Noshim. That means Nedarim is one of the Masechtos after Gittin Kiddushin and Ksuvas. You have Nedarim, Nazir, and Sotah. So it's one of the Masechtos in Noshim. So the Rambam wants to know why. At first, the Rambam says, you know what the reason is? Because it involves women making promises and their husband hears about it, etc. But that's not till the 9th parak of Nedarim. Comes up with a totally different answer. His answer is fascinating. He says, what is the laws of Nedarim? Nedarim is all about what you say, how you speak, and how we interpret what you say. That means if you go through Masechet Nedarim, there are regular Nedarim, there are Yodos Nedarim. I'll give you an example. If a person says to you, will you meet me on Sunday at 10 o'clock? And you say, yes, yes. The fact that you said yes twice, you just made a promise. It's a neder. As a matter of fact, before we do a Jewish divorce, a get, the first thing we do is we ask the husband, do you give this out of your own free will? He says yes. Did you ever make a promise, an oath, ban about forcing you? He says no. Maybe you did and you forgot about it. He says, no, I never did. He says, we're going to release you anyway. We do have tarat nedarim. Because it's possible, in a moment of anger, his wife says, you'll never give me again. And he says, you're right. You are 100% right. He just said right twice. We might have said yes, yes. He might not even realize. He might have forgotten about it. So we release him. That's the halacha. So the Rambam says, one of the most important parts of marriage is communication, how you talk. Do you make promises? Do you keep your word? How you say things to your wife? He says, believe it or not, Nidarim is all about your mouth. You know where that belongs? In Nashim. In the laws of Gittin and Kiddushin and Ksuvas, it belongs there. That's what the Rambam says. Fascinating. Even though a base din is the one that's matur neder, and it would imply that it has nizikin, I made a promise to you on a business deal and I broke my promise. He says that's all true. But it's more important, he says, in learning how to speak, communication, understanding one another is a husband and a wife issue. And that's why it's in Nashim. Very, very
So how
fascinating.
come we don't do Atarat Nedarim on Tisha B'Av?
We don't do Hatarat Nedarim on Shabbat.
Tisha B'Av?
On Tisha B'Av?
Do we do it?
No. We do before Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, before Rosh Hashanah. That's why we're not allowed to do this. Let's say there is a get that before you give the get, right?
Beginning of
Right.
You do the Atarat
Atarat
Nedarim
Nedarim.
also. How come we can do this on before Tisha B'Av also?
Why Tisha B'Av? What's so special about Nedarim and Tisha B'Av?
I'm just trying to ask him because the Yom Kippur is the same as a Tisha B'Av that you keep a long
Not
time.
really.
No?
It's a different day.
Some people do it in the first of the Elul.
Some people do first of all because you're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah and you don't want to have outstanding vows. Remember, it's very
3 times a year,
important, right? It's very important because if you make promises, you don't keep them, the consequences are quite severe. Now, Rabbi Nissim Alpert, he has some interesting lessons that he learns over here. He says that Moshe spoke to the Roshei HaMatot. When you speak to, there are different ways to say the word tribe in Hebrew. One way is Shevet. One way is Mateh Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim. When the Torah uses the word Shevet, it usually means taking a stick and beating someone into following. Shevet Api usually refers to anger. Mateh is gentle, means to lean or change or convince someone what they're doing is wrong. Moshe spoke to the Roshei HaMatot. He spoke to the leaders of each tribe. You know what he said to them? He says, you're leaders. There are 2 ways to lead. You can be tough, and you can tell people and scream at people and yell at people, or you can be soft, and you can educate people, direct people, guide people. He says, you want to know my advice? My advice is Roshei HaMatos. Be soft. Speak softly. Let me talk to you about language. Let me talk to you about words. Let me talk to you about communication. It's easier to speak to people and influence them through the power of your words versus trying to influence them with the power of your stick. So Moshe, he speaks to them through Roshei HaMatos. That's the first lesson that it comes to teach you. The second thing he teaches them is that many times, the leaders of a tribe are politicians. And what is the biggest criticism we have of politicians? They don't keep their word. They make promises during the election and they don't keep their word. So Moshe speaks to the Roshei HaMatos. He says, listen, when you take the job of being one of the leaders, I'm telling you there's a halacha, you have to do what you say. So don't make promises you don't plan to keep. Very, very important that you must follow through and keep the words as best you can, because otherwise you run the risk of violating many, many halachot. There's an interesting Bal HaTurim. Bal HaTurim says that Nidorim, promises, has the same gematria as Rotseach, murderer. Why? Because the Gemara says that if a person makes promises all the time and doesn't keep them, his children suffer the consequences, his wife suffers the consequences. There are many, many consequences that come when someone makes a neder, a promise, and doesn't keep them. We have the famous story with Yiftach. What was the story with Yiftach? Yiftach was chosen to be one of the shoftim, one of the leaders of the Jewish people, to lead a battle against, I think, Ammon it was. At any rate, during the battle, he said to Hashem, I make a promise to you. if you help me win this war, I will bring as a sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house. Thinking it'll be a goat or a sheep or a cow, whatever it is. What was the first thing that came out of his house when he came back from battle? His daughter. And he wasn't going to bring his daughter as a sacrifice. Some people do say he killed her. There are books written about it. Some people say she just never got married, so she never had children, or she lived alone. At any rate, the Gemara says that clearly Yiftach made this promise without thinking straight. And he could have gotten the Sanhedrin or the Gadol Hador to release him. Who was that? That was Pinchas. So they said to Yiftach, go to Pinchas, he'll release you, he'll free you from your neder. Yiftach's response was, I'm the leader. If anybody goes to anybody, Pinchas should come to me. I shouldn't go to Pinchas. So people went to Pinchas and says, Yiftach has a terrible problem, go to him and help fix it. And Pinchas says, I'm the Kohen Gadol. I don't make house calls. If he has a problem, let him come to the Beis HaMikdash like everybody else. There's a mitzvah to be Olei Regel. When he comes up one day to Yerushalayim, he'll come and see me. I don't make house calls. In the end, nothing was done. And there were consequences. They say that Yiftach, when he died, parts of his body fell off. I guess he had some type of an illness. He was buried, his hand was here, his foot was here, his arm was there. He didn't have one burial spot. He was buried all over Har Gilad. And they say Pinchas's consequence was that he lost his kahuna in some ways, and he lost his nevuah. So here you have two leaders, both got punished, for not following through. Again, the power of a neder that has to be kept into consideration. There's a famous story with Tzidkiyahu. You have to know your history. Tzidkiyahu was the last king of Yehuda, right? In his days, or a little bit before already, it was years before, the person who came in and conquered, the Sancheriv took the 10 tribes away. But then Yehuda was left, Yehuda and Binyamin. And they were successful for a while until Nebuchadnezzar came. And Nebuchadnezzar came, and the first time he came, he took many into Galut, into Bavel. That's when Daniel went, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, that whole group went. Eventually, Nebuchadnezzar really liked Tzidkiyahu. Tzidkiyahu and him hit it off. They became good friends. I won't say as good friends as Trump and Putin, I don't know about that, but they, I guess Nebuchadnezzar had never hacked into the elections of Tzidkiyahu, whatever it was, I don't know. At any rate, it's a little bit political satire. So they became good friends. And Nebuchadnezzar spared Tzidkiyahu's life and even gave him some very important positions in the government. The Gemara says, one day, the Medrash says, Tzidkiyahu walked into Nebuchadnezzar's dining room, and what was he doing?
Eating
a rabbit alive. He was so hungry. It looked horrible. Nebuchadnezzar was terribly embarrassed. And he made Tzidkiyahu promise, take a shavua, promise, you won't tell anyone. Nebuchadnezzar actually believed that if Tzidkiyahu made a promise, he would keep his promise. Because the Torah is very strict about keeping your promise. You have to be very, very strict. And he did for many years. Then it seems that there was a whole meeting of kings, and they wanted to appoint Nebuchadnezzar the king of all the kings. And because they felt he was very righteous and noble and upstanding, and Tzidkiyahu couldn't take it anymore. He knew this guy was a lowlife. He knew that he was hidden out of view. He did horrible things, and he didn't want to keep his mouth shut anymore. So he went to the Sanhedrin, and he said to the Sanhedrin, I made a promise to Nebuchadnezzar, I want to be released from that promise. And they released him. And he told everybody what Nebuchadnezzar did. Well, as you can imagine, Nebuchadnezzar was not happy. And he took the Sanhedrin, and he tied them up to the back of horses, and he dragged their bodies through the streets of Lud, or eventually I guess that he killed them all. And he killed Tzidkiyahu, and he killed Tzidkiyahu's children. He blinded Tzidkiyahu first, and he killed him. So the Medrash goes to show you that how far people will go if you violate your promise, your word. That means when you give your word, it's your bond. And if you so quickly to violate it, it means you have no credibility. You're not an honest person. And if you're not an honest person, no one can trust you. So, good, bad, or ugly, it comes out that there were many stories about how bad it was to violate the rules and regulations of what it meant to be an honest person. You remember the story I told you from the Sons of Rov about the community that needed a mikvah? Do you remember that story? Let me tell it to you again. It's a great story. But I told it to you about a year or two ago. There was the Sons of Rov is a big tzaddik. It was the Hasidic rabbi of Sons. You have in Israel, he built a beautiful hospital up near Netanya area, Haifa area. Really a very well-known hospital, the Dino Hospital. Anyway, the Sons of Rov comes to one of his communities where he has many of his Hasidic followers, and he noticed that the mikveh was in terrible condition, almost non-existent. And he's called a meeting of the community leaders, and he says, you have to rebuild the mikveh, you have to fix the mikveh, because the mikveh is in terrible condition, people don't want to use it, and if people don't use the mikveh, you're causing tremendous problems, for everybody. So the leaders of the community, they met with him, and they said to him, we would love to do it, but it costs a lot of money, and we don't have the money. Simple dollars and cents. Finance, we don't have the money. So the Sons of Rov says, there must be somebody here who can finance this project. He said, yeah, there's a rich guy, very wealthy guy, but you're wasting your time. Because this guy never puts his hand in his pocket. We need a crowbar to get $1 out of this guy. You're never going to get the money for a bit. Forget about it. Sons of Rov said, let me speak to him. Let me take care of that. He says, you're wasting your time. We don't want you to waste your time. He says, okay, it's my time to waste. Calls the guy in. He says, you know who I am? He says, yeah, you're the Sons of Rov, the Sons of R.Rabbi. He says, have you heard any stories about me? He says, yeah, you're a miracle worker. You can do things nobody can do. He says, well, everybody has something they need. Everybody has a dream, a wish. Tell me what your dream is. Tell me what your wish is. And maybe I can fulfill your dream, and then you can fulfill my dream. So the guy says, Rebbe,
my wife.
Right. I have a wish, but you're never going to be able to do it. He says, come on, try me. People have tried me. They've never been disappointed. He says, you're not going to do what I want. He says, come on, give it a try. What could it hurt? He says, okay. I am married to the worst witch in the world. I would divorce her, but she would take half my money. So I don't want to divorce her. What I want is that she should drop dead. Could you please put in a word into heaven that my wife should drop dead? So the Sons of Rebbe says, this is not Murder Incorporated. It's not I love for murder. I'm not a mafia guy. Come on, give me a break here. He says, but I'll tell you what you're going to do. The Gemara says that if you make promises and you don't keep your promise, then the punishment is your wife could die. So this Shabbos, go to shul, get called up to the Torah, make a mishaber for everybody in the shul. When they ask, what are you going to donate? Make an announcement, I'm going to donate a new mikvah.
You're going to do what?
A new mikvah. I'm going to pay for the new mikvah. And then on Sunday, when they come to collect the check, tell them you changed your mind. And Hashem will do the rest. Okay. So he goes to shul, gets called up to the Torah, he makes a mishaber for everybody, and there's their dog, their cat, you name it. And when the Gabbai says, and what is your donation? He says, I'm going to build a new mikvah. Whoa, everybody's so excited, can't believe it. The Sons of Rebbe, they're all, why, Matot, that's fantastic. Come Sunday, the leaders of the community come to collect the check, $100,000 check, whatever it is. And the guy says, I changed my mind, I'm not giving you a dime. And they were so angry they knew it. Okay. A few weeks later, the guy comes back to the Sons of Rebbe. So Sons of Rebbe says, so tell me, how's it going? What's going on? He says, Rebbe, things have gotten worse, not better. He says, what do you mean gotten worse? He says, my wife is as ornery and as horrible as ever. She's as strong as an ox. She's going to live to be 1,000. Nothing's going to kill this woman. I mean, you got to help me. So he says, I don't get it. You made a promise. You broke your promise. Hashem's supposed to take care of the rest. Doesn't make any sense. Tell me what happens when you come home at the end of the day. He says, when I come home at the end of the day, the house is a mess, supper's not made, no one did the shopping, and I yell at my wife and I call her all these crazy, horrible names. The whole neighborhood hears me when I yell at my wife. He says, well, that's the problem, he says. When you embarrass someone, it's like you killed them. So your wife dies every day, you come home, so of course Hashem doesn't kill her. She's already dead from your embarrassment. You gotta do different. When you come home, you gotta be sweet to her and nice to her and make her feel loved and buy her flowers and buy her jewelry and buy her presents. Then Hashem will take over. He says, great idea. Okay. So now he comes home, he buys her a car, he buys her jewelry, he buys her candy, buys her chocolate. He gets her a servant, a maid, gets cleaning help. 2 or 3 weeks later, he comes back to the sons of Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, you gotta help me. He says, what's the problem? Did you follow what I said? He says, of course I did. And when I started to buy my wife all these wonderful things, she became sweet and nice. And I remember that's the girl I married, but now she's in the hospital, she's sick.
Nice.
He says, well, that's the plan, right? He says, yeah, but that was the old wife. Now that she's changed, I don't want her to die. I want her to live. He says, what's the problem? Write out a check for the mikvah.
Keep your promise.
Keep your promise. Write out a check for the mikvah, and she'll get better. Famous story with the sons of and the story about keeping your promise. Don't you remember I once told you that? It's a great story. It's a great story. The power of keeping your word. When you keep your word, there are many brachos. When you don't keep your word, there are certain consequences. We have in this week's parsha that Hashem says to Moshe to take revenge against Midian. Not Moab, Midian, because of, not Moab, even though Moab was the one who really started the problem. But we explained to you Moab had to get out of jail free card because of Rus. Okay. So now, how many soldiers does he take? He takes 1,000 from every shevet, 12,000. Okay, 12,000. Then he took 12,000 who kept the food lines, the supply lines, and he took a third set of 12,000 that did Tehillim, David. So he took 36,000. Got it. Of the 12,000, Shevet Levi sent 1,000.
Yeah, it was 13.
So there wasn't 13, there was only 12.
Yeah.
So who didn't go?
Benjamin?
Binyamin went.
Oh, no,
Yosef sometimes sends together, but this time Ephraim and Manasseh each sent 1,000. You know what Shevet didn't send 1,000? Shimon. Because they were still angry. Because their Nasi got killed. It's very fascinating that there were 2 Shvatim that Yaakov didn't give brachos to. Right, Shimon and Levi. Levi stepped up over here and fought to protect Moshe's honor. Shimon said no. When Shimon said no, Moshe says, you don't fight, you don't get a bracha. And in the end, Shevet Shimon got no bracha, and Yoshua gave them no portion in Israel. The Nachala they got in Israel came from Yehuda. Yehuda gave them a strip of land. So Shimon really had opportunities to change their lifestyle, to change their direction.
Fix it.
They didn't do it. They didn't fix it. So it's interesting that of all the tribes that went, Shevet Shimon did not go, and that's sad because they had opportunities to go and they didn't go. In Parshas Masay, they talk about 42 journeys. They traveled 42 places, and that's over 40 years. What we don't realize is, and it's interesting, that there are many times people have challenges or journeys in their life, sometimes good, sometimes bad, and they want to forget about it. Parshas Masay teaches us that we have to remember the journeys of Hashem even when we're not happy. It means even though some of the places had painful memories, Moshe reminded the Jewish people again about them. Just remember, he's talking about the new generation. That means all the places they traveled, most of the people he was talking to were never there. It was their parents that were there. The women still were alive, but the men were not. The men died in the desert. In the first year of the 42 places, they traveled to 12. in year 1. So that left them only 30. In year 2, they traveled like another 10 or 12 places. So it comes out that for 38 years, they traveled to maybe 5 places. They stayed in some places 20 years. That's a long time. When we think them walking the desert, we get the impression that every day they traveled and they were traveling. They were in some places for 10 years, 15 years. They didn't travel anywhere.
Why?
There was no place to go. The Shekhinah was not talking to Moshe. They were just, it was like a big kollel. Do you know what they called the Jewish camp in those days? Lakewood. I'm just messing with him. That's
Lake?
Lakewood.
Lake.
They just sat there, they didn't go anywhere. Now let me give you an example. Let's go for an example. The first, they left Egypt, right? They left Egypt on Pesach time. The first place they stopped was Ramses. From Ramses, they traveled right away to Sukkot. And it was called Sukkah because Hashem gave them the clouds. So right when they left Egypt, they had 7 clouds protecting them. From there, they went to Eson, which was the Egyptian border. Pihachiros was those mountains that nobody could penetrate, which they did. And remember, that's where Korach found one of Yosef's hidden treasures. They went to Morah. Morah means bitter. Why? Because they had no water. And that's when Moshe hit the rock the first time, and the well of Miriam came. Okay, that's all the first year. It was all within the first few weeks. Then they came to Elima, 70 palm trees, 12 fresh wells, and then they came to the Yam Suf. So the first 7 stops took place in the first 7 days, because the Yam Suf was on the 7th day of Pesach. So they traveled from when they left Mitzrayim, 7 of the stops was in the first week. That's just how quickly they were traveling. Then they crossed the Yam Suf. Okay. They came to Midbar Sin. They were in Dovka. And then they went to Alush. Alush is where they got the mun. They ran out of food. And that was in Chodesh Iyar. They got the mun. Why was it called Alush? Because Sorah said, Lushi v'asei ugot. And the man was in that schus. They came to Refidim, again no water, that's when Moshe hit the rock, I'm sorry. First time Morah was not, he put some trees in. The Refidim is he hit the rock, and then Rosh Chodesh Sivan, stop number 12, they came to Midbar Sinai, Har Sinai. So within the first 50 days, they traveled in 12 sections, 12 stops. Right? Year 2 was Kivros Hataiva, Chatzeros, the Chet of Miriam, Risma, the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies. Then Rimon Peretz, Livna, Risa, Kehilasa was Korach's rebellion, Har Shofer, and then came, so that was 20. So by year 2, they already traveled 20 places. So they had 22 places left. Most of them came at the end of the travels. Then they came to very small areas. Makhelos, they did Tshuva, Tachas, small groups, Terach, after Avram's father, Terach. Miska, they found sweet water, Chashmona, a remiss to Hanukkah, Moseros and Bnei Yakon, little places. Yotvasa. Then came the very end. The very end was Midbar Tzin, Miriam died. Then they went to Hor HaHor, Aharon died. Then they went to Tzalmona, Punan, and Ovos, where they battled Edom, Moab, Sichon, Og. And then Har Nevo, Arvos Moab. So the last month or 2, they traveled also to 7 places. So it comes out for the 38 years that they were primarily in the desert, they traveled absolutely nowhere. They stayed in places easily, 15, 20 years, easily. It was unbelievable. Okay.
Everything was good.
Everything was okay. I don't know if everything was good,
Was
but everything
perfect,
was
Food was,
okay.
water was, everything.
Food was, water
Condition
was, air conditioning was working. They didn't have a chamsin, they didn't have hot weather, everything was fine. Okay. Comes towards the end. We have a lot of different stories I want to share with you. A few stories, new stories I have for you tonight. This parsha is packed. So now they're by the border. Moshe's getting ready for his final speeches, Eila Hadvorah, and he's approached by two tribes, Reuven and Gad. What did they say to Moshe? We have a lot of cattle. One of the reasons they had so many cattle was because they only ate the man. They didn't kill cattle. Other tribes killed cattle, they wanted meat. They didn't want meat, they had man. So they had a lot of cattle. And on this side of the Jordan, the land was flush green, plenty of grass, great for cattle. So they said to Moshe, we'd like to stay here. What was Moshe's first reaction?
No. Like them around.
His first reaction was, we've had this story before. That was 40 years ago, and it cost us 40 years of our lives and everybody died. What are you doing? You can't stay here. This is only part of Israel. You got to cross over the Jordan, you got to fight with everybody else. B'nai Reuven and Gad were taken aback. They said to Moshe, what do you think? You think we're cowards? We're not cowards. We're braver than everybody else. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to fight with the rest of the Jewish people for 7 years, to the end. And then we're not going to leave. We're going to stay another 7 years till they divide all the land. 14 years. Only after the land is conquered and divided, then we'll go. Okay? The term the Torah uses is V'yisim nikiyim me'Hashem Yisrael. It's not enough to be clean or pure in the eyes of God. We're going to be pure in the eyes of the Jews. Our brothers are going to see us and recognize us. While they're building places for their families, we're going to stand guard on the border. We're going to protect them. 14 years. The Gemara says by the time they came back home, they didn't recognize their own kids. Because when they left, the kid could have been 1 year old. Now when they came back, the kid is 15 years old. He's a teenager. He grew up without a father. He says even Moshe maybe didn't realize the sacrifice they made. Because Moshe gave them two important lessons. The first lesson Moshe said to him is, if the Jewish people are fighting a war in Canaan, you cannot stay here. That means when Jews are fighting, everybody fights. There's no such thing, oh, there's problems in Israel? That's Israel. I live in the United States. We don't have that problem. When there's a war in Israel, Jews all over the world are at war. That's the first lesson Moshe says. No such thing as you stay here and the Jews are fighting here. That's out. The second thing is, they misspoke. They said to Moshe, we're going to build corrals for our cattle and houses for our kids. Moshe says, no, you got that backwards. What are you going to build first? Houses for your kids and corrals for the cows. Now, I understand why they misspoke. Because they weren't really building houses. They conquered a whole area that had cities built. In those cities, what were there? Houses, empty houses. So they just moved into the empty houses. They had nothing to build. Maybe they had to clean out the idols and they had to clean up the houses, maybe give a new paint job, put in a new floor. Most of the women wanted a new kitchen, stuff like that. But besides that, they wanted 2 sinks and 2 stoves and everything else. But, so I understand why they said what they said. They didn't think about houses because the houses were there. But Moshe says, no, you're first going to settle your kids, and then you're going to settle the cattle. Rabbi Nelson Sherman spoke. He said something very interesting. He says, I've been to many people who were dying in the hospital. He says, never did anybody in his deathbed say to me, you know what my biggest regret is? I didn't spend more time in the office. No one ever said that. They always said, I didn't spend more time with my kids, with my grandchildren, with my family. No one ever says, I wish I spent more time in the office. So he says, for them to have said, we're going to build, for our cattle before our kids, that wasn't going to happen. That wasn't part of the plan. Now, it's interesting The whole section deals with Reuven and Gad. You know who's not mentioned at all in that section? Half Shevet Menashe, not till the very end. The Medrash says, the Gemara says, that Menashe never wanted to stay on this side of the Jordan. Why did they? Because Moshe asked them. Moshe says they need guidance, and Menashe had very strong Talmidei Chachamim. So Moshe asked half of the tribe of Menashe, could you just take care of them spiritually? And they agreed. And Menashe didn't even have land to conquer, so they had to fight, and they fought. It says that Mocher and Menashe, different people fought and conquered land, territory, in order to conquer that. But Menashe didn't even have the land. So Reuven and Gad were the ones who wanted to stay. There was the half tribe of Menashe that only came afterwards as an afterthought. They were not the original people going to stay. So they came afterwards and they agreed to stay. Now, it's unfortunate that these 2.5 tribes, were distant from the main bulk of the Jewish people, even though it didn't look like it was that far, but it was far. It's like New York and New Jersey. You have to cross the bridge. Most people didn't want to cross the bridge. And the 2.5 tribes wanted to Galut first. Reuven, Gad, and they had 3 Ir Miklots over there because they had as many accidental deaths in those 2.5 tribes like the 9.5 tribes. So there were a lot of problems for their request. They would have been better off going into Israel. They didn't, but they would have been better off. Okay, they bring down the story, interesting story, of the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer is the such a R.Rabbi. He was once ill, and the doctor told him that he had to avoid stress, and therefore he couldn't learn the long hours he was used to learning. And he couldn't even learn Be'iyun. He couldn't learn Gemara in depth. He had to learn like Chumash and simple things. And he was very depressed. He was very saddened by this. And his father-in-law, who was the Kotzker Rebbe, came over to him, and he noticed that he was upset and said to him, what are you so upset about? And he says, because my learning is being compromised. Because of my weakness, because of my illness, I can't learn the way I normally used to learn. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, you think you're better than Moshe Rabbeinu? He says, no, of course not. He says, well, look at Moshe Rabbeinu. The army goes to Midian, and they have a war. What do they bring back? Spoils of war. Sheep, cattle, goats, chickens, money. What does Hashem say to Moshe? Moshe, I want you personally to count everything and divide it up. The soldiers got a certain amount, everybody else got a certain amount, and everybody took from what they got and gave it to the Kohen and Levi. So he says, well, look at Moshe. Here's Moshe who went to Har Sinai and went up to Shemayim 3 times. 120 days he spent in heaven. Now he's 120 years old. What's he doing? 1 goat, 2 goats, 3 goats, 4 sheep, 5. Okay, you get 10 goats and a cow. I mean, how do you think Moshe Rabbeinu felt? Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to learn Taisvis, wanted to learn the Rishonim. He wanted to learn, Ksos and the Choshen or the Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And he's counting sheep, he's counting goats. The answer is that sometimes you get close to Hashem by learning Tosfos. And sometimes you get close to Hashem by counting goats. It's what Hashem wants you to do is what you do. Not everybody has the same opportunities. Sometimes you don't have the opportunities that he has. It's because Hashem has a different plan for you. As long as you do the plan, you are successful in getting close to Hashem. He says, you want to learn in depth and the long hours. Hashem says, no. I don't want that from you today. I want you to learn Rashi. I want you to learn Chumash. You feel less than fulfilled? Don't. That's what Hashem wants. And if you do what Hashem wants, you should be very happy. You don't have to double think what Hashem wants. Follow what Hashem wants. So he says you have to be very, very happy to do what Hashem wants. And that was his answer. Okay? So when opportunities come your way or don't come your way, you don't have to be jealous that someone else has a good opportunity. You should do what you want. Okay. It says that, they came into the land, they were dividing up the land, they were going to use the Goral, everybody was going to get a portion. Listen to this story. It's a documented story about Reb Nosson Adler. Who was Reb Nosson Adler? He was a pulpit rabbi in the main shul of Hanover, Germany.
What year is it?
Okay, Hanover is near Berlin, it's in
Yeah,
Germany.
When was it?
1800s, late 1800s. He was also, I think, the Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer. So Reb Nosson Adler was a very well-known rabbi, a very accomplished Talmud Chacham, a very big scholar. At that time, Queen Victoria of England had come to Hanover, Germany for a visit with her husband. She was expecting. She was in the 7th month of pregnancy. They arrived for a vacation in Germany, and she went into labor 2 months early. At that time, Sir Moshe Montefiore, who was well known to the British Crown and financial advisor to the British government, happened to be in Hanover, and he went to visit the Queen. And the Queen confided in him that she's in a terrible situation because she's now in Germany. If she has the baby in Germany, according to international law, the baby would be a German citizen. And if that baby was a boy, he could not take over as king in England because he was not born on British soil. So Reb Moshe Montefiore went to daven in the shul of Rabbi Adler. After they greeted each other, he confided in Rabbi Adler the Queen's problem. So immediately Rabbi Adler said to him, how did she get to Germany? Aboard the famous British warship, the Ark Royal. Where is that ship now? In the harbor. He says, go to the Queen and immediately put her on the ship and set sail for outside the international boundary. Because the rule is a child born on a British ship
He's British.
is a British citizen. And that's exactly what they did. She went on the ship, she set sail, went out of the Germany water boundary.
Waters.
She was international, she was on the ocean in the international waters. She had a baby boy. That baby boy became one day King Edward VII, and he became King of England because he was born in international waters. She never forgot what Rabbi Adler did. And when she came back to England, she said, I'm going to create a new position in Parliament, Chief Rabbi of the British Commonwealth. And everybody applied for the job. And she had hundreds of resumes, and she threw all the resumes out. She said, I have the rabbi who I'm going to appoint Chief Rabbi of England, and that was Reb Nosson Adler. And Rabbi Adler became the first chief rabbi of the British Empire, a post he filled with honor and distinction for 45 years.
Wow.
And that is still there today. In
Still have
England, they still have a chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth. Lord Jacobowitz was there, Rabbi Yonason Sachs, now they have a new one. They change it, I think, every 10 or 15 years, appointed by Parliament. It's the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and there's a position in England today called Chief Rabbi.
Who's now?
The House
I don't know
Lord
the
is
name
the
of the
same as
person now.
a
One thing I
Congress.
do know, they don't change them every week. And this is not appointed by some committee that I never heard of. This is appointed by the government of England. What were we going to say?
The House of Lords is the same as a Congress in America, no?
They have the Congress has their two houses, House of Commons, House of Lords. House of Lords is more royal members, doesn't have the power like the Senate and the House of Representatives, a little bit different. But the position of chief rabbi, now you have to understand that in Israel we also have chief rabbis because a lot of the Israeli government was set up by the British. So it's very common. But Reb Nosson Adler became the first chief rabbi. And he was very highly respected, all because Queen Victoria never forgot what he did. Okay. When the person gets called up to the Torah this past Shabbos, the last Aliyah, number 7, and whoever's reading, you finish Parshas Masay, right? So you get to the end of Parshas Masay, And there you go, and you say, Eila ha-mitzvos ha-mishpatim asher shiva Hashem b'yam Moshe el b'nei Yisrael ba'arvos Moav al Yarden Yerechel. What do you say after that? Okay, and here it's printed in the Chumash, Chazak, Chazak, v'nit Chazek. Okay. So according to the halacha, many of the opinions, you're not correct. You're wrong.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
So here's from the Piskei Tshuvos, I photocopied it. So he says as follows. He says, number one, when a person gets called up to the Torah, when they come down after the Aliyah, what are you supposed to say to him? Very good. Achein minach hasfardim, we say Yasher Koyach. Shkoyach, that's the Ashkenazi way. Achein minach Sfardim kenu, the minach of the Sfardim is Lomer Chazak ubaruch. Chazak ubaruch. Okay.
What does it mean?
You should be strong and you should be blessed. And it says that its source comes from the Avudra home and the Knesset Hagadolah. Okay? Now, Ashkenazim, when they finish reading a whole section of the Torah, one of the books, they say Chazak, Chazak, v'nis Chazek. However, he says that the Aruch HaShulchan and many of the Rishonim and Achronim say that's a mistake. You're supposed to say Chazak, Chazak, Chazak 3 times. Why? Fascinating. The numerical value of the word Chazak is 115. 3 times 115 is 345, which is the gematria of Moshe.
If you say halfway, that's it, then no make.
If you say V'nit Chazek, it's not Moshe anymore. So he brings down that the Nachon, the proper way of saying it, is Chazak, Chazak, Chazak. And Shehu gematria Moshe, V'chein Roy Lomar. He brings down from the Aruch HaShulchan, that's the right way to do it. So it's interesting. We say Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, and there are some sources for that, but that's not really the correct way. Now, the person who got the Aliyah, does he also say Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek? No. It says here, everybody is saying that to him as a bracha. If he says it, he's giving himself a bracha. So he's not supposed to say it. And then some people say, when he finishes, you're supposed to make the bracha right away, you're not supposed to talk in between. So he says, that you should not. He says, the person himself who gets called the Aliyah, it's very nice that he got the Aliyah, but he does not make that bracha. He does not say Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. He just sits there and just soaks it all in. And then he makes a mishaberach for all of you guys, and he makes a large donation, which maybe he keeps and maybe he doesn't. Depends what's going on in his house. Depends what's going on in his house. Maybe that's why this guy was so upset when he came home on Motzei Shabbat. His wife was still there. Because then you're thinking that by the time he came home, she'd be gone. But that wasn't the case. She was still there. Okay, 9:25, 9:26. This Shabbos is Tisha B'Av.
9:23.
We don't keep Tisha B'Av on Shabbos. We push it off till Sunday. So comes Motzei Shabbat, we make Borei Ha'esh, and Sunday night we make Havdalah, generally not on grape juice. We make it on something that's not wine. So you can make it on beer, you can make it on orange juice, you can make it on, because you don't drink wine.
Yeah, but the grape juice doesn't have
But
any
the
alcohol.
only
You
come
have to
out
have them after when
Well, it is,
On the
but
11th.
we still keep, even
after
though,
fast?
right, we still keep after the fast some of the minhagim. You know, especially you guys who have only keep the Shavuot that Tisha B'Av falls out, keep something this year. Pretend it's Tisha
When is
B'Av.
it? What time is
Don't have-
fast it's over?
That's a very good question.
What time it started?
It didn't start yet.
before
or
sunset.
8 or something.
I know it. It starts 3:25 in the morning.
No,
8:05. 8:05 in nighttime.
No,
It starts, it's a 24-hour
Motzei Shabbat.
fast.
24 hours?
26.
26 hours.
26 hours.
like
It
Yom
starts
Kippur.
Motzei-
Yom Kippur?
like Yom Kippur.
8:05.
That's
8:05.
8:05 Saturday night.
That's what Shlomo was saying, that it's like Yom Kippur. It starts, so we have to stop eating Sudash Lishit before sunset.
Yeah, 8:05.
Now, it's still Shabbos until Shabbos is out, and then when Shabbos is out, you say, Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol, you change your shoes,
Huh?
you change your shoes,
Tafshit тоже?
right.
But I have to
And
go
you
to work
only
next
make
day.
Moreh Moreh Ha'esh. And then Sunday night, you make Havdalah, but you don't make
Kosher.
Samim.
Что, кожаные, что ли?
A woman is also supposed to not wear the leather shoes.
That's right.
Everybody.
Women are Jewish just like men.
Okay, how am I gonna go to work?
Wear tennis shoes. Wear,
Trap
there are
shoes.
plenty of shoes that are
Rolling
leather.
shoes.
I don't think any of my shoes have real leather to it.
Кто тебе сказал,
I have
можно
tennis
работать?
shoes, whatever it is, running shoes.
No,
На Йом Кипур нельзя работать.
The same shoes you wear on Yom
But you
Kippur.
can work, yeah?
No, Simon Barakah.
So some people don't work. Some people work only after the afternoons.
А если некому работать,
But if you have to work, you have to work.
А?
Если тебя
If you
выгонят,
have to work, you have to work. Elderly
Boss
people
сказал, придешь.
often don't fast the whole day because it's a
Да,
nidra.
Если можем, вынуждены, по нужде это можете.
But they have to
Если по
watch the
нужде
tree, they
можете,
have to
если
speak
у
to the
вас
doctor.
можете
and they have
относиться, то
to-
можно проситься.
There's no mitzvah to put yourself in sakonas nefashos.
по возможности отпроситься. Если босс
Не
скажет, нет, я
отпустят,
тебя,
никого нет,
я
он
тебя
уехал специально.
Tisha
уволю.
B'Av is important. I mean, people go hear shiurim all Tisha B'Av.
Никто
There are
про это
videos.
подробности
There's, I'm sure Chazak is running programs and Gabriel.
Yeah, yes.
There are plenty of speakers around to hear. But that's Tisha B'Av is an important thing. We hear Eicha, we sit on the ground until the afternoon, and then in the afternoon already our mood changes.
So what are you gonna be doing?
And we get a little bit more positive, and hopefully that, right, and then we get to the next Shabbos, which is Shabbos Nachamu already, and Tu B'Av, you know,
Шевель.
we all party and do everything else. And then we get,
Excited.
right, then we get ready.
So after the fast, we do the Havdalah with the beer or juice.
Right, with, or soda, Coke,
How come
what do you
none
do
of the
usually?
rabbis says yes
Rabbi.
to us?
I don't know.
What do
What
you
about
do?
that?
We don't do grape juice.
What about the apple juice? Grape juice you can
It has to be something that's Chamar Medina,
Wha-
something
what?
you give,
Well,
you serve
I can drink
someone.
the beer, I can't drink
No,
coke.
it's something you serve someone, even though they're not thirsty.
Why no grape juice? Why?
Grape juice is like wine, we don't
Yeah,
drink.
why you said no? We don't do it on the.
Because during the 9 days, we don't drink wine or grape juice.
Oh,
And on Tisha
Shabbat?
B'Av, we don't do anything until
Even on
the...
Shabbat?
On Shabbat is different. But we don't do anything until the next day.
Все пьют, конечно.
Even though Tisha B'Av is being pushed off, at night, we still keep some of the restrictions until the next morning.
what is it?
Well, relations and shaving, we don't shave Sunday night, we wait till Monday morning. There was a person, an Ashkenazi guy, he says, I'm becoming Sephardi.
Why?
He says, why are you becoming
No
Sephardi?
restriction.
He says, because they don't keep the 9 days, they only keep the
One.
week that Tisha B'Av falls out.
But this week no problem.
So, for example, this year,